Hello, everyone. This is Debra Richardson, and today I am putting the AP in Happy, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. This podcast will give a voice to accounts payable team members by talking about the growing reality of cyber attacks in their world and which vendor setup and vendor management techniques they can apply to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Need training? Visit the Vendor Process Training Center to enroll in your choice of weekly live and on-demand training sessions. Plus, get access to vendor setup form templates and reference tools that will help you and your team avoid fraud, fines, and bad vendor data. So sign up for a free account to get access to free training sessions, vendor process FAQs, and a resource library with information you need to manage your vendor master file. Visit training.debrarrichardson.com today. The link will be in the show notes. If you are getting ready for tax reporting for tax year 2025 and need the important things to know or do regarding the 1099 NEC, the 1099 MISC, and the 1042S, this podcast episode is for you. Starting with 2 that you don't have to worry about yet, and 3 that you do. Keep listening. Welcome to episode 367. The top 5 things to know or do now for 1099 NEC, 1099 MISC, and 1042S tax reporting for tax year 2025. Wow, that sounds like a lot, but you know what? There are a couple of things you really don't have to worry about, and 3 things that you do. And so these things you can get on your radar now because at least one of them you have to do as soon as possible if needed. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first 2, again, I'm going to talk about what you don't have to worry about. And this first one was something that came up over and over again when we had a meeting just to talk about, your 1099, 1042 questions. And so the very first thing that everybody wanted to know was about the big, beautiful tax bill or big, beautiful, I don't know, one big, beautiful, whatever that is called, and the changes that are involved in it. One of them was increasing the reporting threshold for non-employee compensation, for contractor payments, for other payments that are included. I believe the act or regulation is 6041A. And so this is rents, this is prizes and awards, other income. So all of the thresholds that were $600 or more, those payment types. And we're still trying to make sure that we understand which ones are involved, but definitely contractor payment services, prizes and awards, attorneys' fees, those type of things are definitely included. However, that is not until tax year 2026. So filing or tax year 2025, filing season 2026, it is still $600 as the threshold for the reportable payments, like they have always been since the early 1900s, apparently, because now that the threshold is changing for tax year 2026, we see all of these historical facts about how long that $600 threshold has been in effect. And apparently, it's been a very long time. And so now right? They are making up for that, and is not quite the cost of living adjustment that would have been had they continued to, or had they included a cost of living adjustment each year since the $600 threshold was enacted. However, it will be $2,000, but again, that is only in effect for tax year 2026. So everything is the same for, not everything, but the threshold is the same for tax year 2025 as it always has been. Now, I'll probably talk about this sometime in 2026, but what this will most likely do is to reduce the amount of 1099 NECs and the amount of 1099 MISC forms that you will have to send, that you will have to report, right, for your vendors. And that's always a great thing. And it may, right, be beneficial for you to calculate that reduction for 2026, for tax year 2026 reporting season or filing season 2027. All right, so that's the first thing. The next one is, don't worry about the draft W-9 that was published October or September 17th, 2025, with a revision date of January 2026. Now, I say that because number one, it has not been published yet. And if you guys remember the latest revision, which is March 2024, that draft version originally came out in July of 2023. It had a revision date of October of that year. Then it had another one came out, had a revision date, I believe, of December. And so we didn't get the published version until March of 2024. Now, that is not to say that the current draft version of the W-9 will not be published in January. But at this point, it hasn't been published yet. And so I would say, don't worry about that until it is published. Now, I will admit, though, that if when it is published, and that includes if it's published in January of 2026, it may mean that you may need to go back through the tax IDs or the W-9s that you have for sole proprietors. And if they submitted an EIN, you may need to collect a social security number, because that is one of the changes, or really the change that affects the vendor setup and maintenance team, or the accounts payable team, whoever does the vendor management, because that social security number will be required at least. That's what it says as of the current revision, or the current draft version of the W-9 form. Now, saying all of that, you may think, yes, I absolutely need to worry about that now, because if it is published January 2026, as it says, I may need to go and do some other work, maybe pull some other folks to review the W-9s on hand and see which ones may require a collection of a new form with an SSN. However, if you have to choose between processing 1099s and 1042s, my recommendation is to definitely process the 1099s and 1042s. Do whatever work needs to be done so that you do not incur potential penalties and fines for filing or distributing payee or recipient statements that are erroneous. And we know those fines can be hefty since it's per form, and you can get penalty for the same 1099 or 1042 for filing incorrectly with the IRS, and also submitting or distributing an incorrect form to the vendor, in effect doubling that fine. All right, so that's the second thing. Now, those are the two that you do need to know about, but you don't need to worry about right now. And so the next three, these are things that you need to know about for tax reporting year, tax year 2025. The first one is you need to use the April 2025 revised versions of the 1099 NEC and 1099 MISC. And so, wasn't it great a couple years back when they came out with the continuous forms where it was 20 and then a field where you can enter in the current year. So 2024, 2025 would not have been great, except, right, they keep changing or revising the forms. And so if they weren't revising the forms, you can continue to use last year's forms. And I can tell you, when I was a practitioner, we were sending out 24 to 30,000 of these forms. We always had to make sure that we purchased, just enough to not waste those forms because we couldn't use them the following year because they were for a specific tax year, the 1099 NEC, 1099 MISC. And so it was great when those continuous forms came out because you wouldn't have to worry about it, except they keep changing and or keep getting revised. And not only that, for the April 2025 revised versions, you may only be able to use those for 1 year. So again, just like we used to do in the past, don't purchase too many and that I didn't say is if you are printing your own. But don't purchase too many because new draft versions of both forms, the 1099 NEC and 1099 MISC, were posted on October 22nd, 2025, with a revision date of December 2026, which means you may have to use these new forms for reporting tax year 2026 as long as those draft versions do get published. So make sure you're using the April 2025 revised versions of the 1099 NEC, 1099 MISC, but don't purchase too many of them if you purchase them to print them in-house because a new draft version with a revision date of December 2026 is out there. And by the way, I will have a link to the IRS draft form so you can keep track of it. I'll also have a link to the IRS published form so you can keep checking that to see when these forms are actually published. And I mean, you can type in W-9 and it will show you the most recently published form. And so if you see, right, the January 2026 revision date, then you know that form has been published. And I will probably see that too, because just like when the latest version of the form, the revision date March 2024, came out every day, I was checking that from like October 2023 all the way to March 2024 to see if the draft version was finally published. And took a long time. That's a lot of checking every day. But you know what? You can do the same thing so that you can be on top of it when those draft forms are published. All right, so that one was number three, and the first of three things that you do have to know or do now for tax year 2025 tax reporting. Now, the second thing that you need to know is that the IRS, the Information Returns Intake System, the new e-filing portal or program that's been available, I think, since January of 2023 for tax year 2022. I could be off a year. But anyway, this is the first year that that system will accept 1042s. Now, the system is currently down now. I think it went down December 3rd. It's going to be up January 6th at 9 a.m. as so they post it. But when it comes back up again, it will have the 1042S form that will be available to be filed within IRS. So, really, that means that for tax year 2025, you can file the 1042S in the FIRE, which is the legacy system, or within IRIS. Now, if you are filing in FIRE, you need a separate transmitter code or TCC, but if you are filing in IRIS, you can use the same IRIS TCC. You don't need a separate transmitter control code if you're filing the 1042S in IRIS versus FIRE. Now, speaking of the transmitter control code or TCC, that is number 5. And the third thing that you need to know or do, and really it's something that you need to do or may need to do if you don't already have a TCC for FIRE or a TCC for IRIS, you need to get one. Now, the IRS says that you need 45 days, allot yourself 45 days before you have to use the TCC in order to get one. They even gave November 1st as a cutoff date for when you needed to apply. Submit your application for an IRIS TCC or a applicable FIRE TCC. However, I will tell you that in many folks' experience, yours could be different. It really does not take that long. So if you do need a TCC, go ahead and apply as soon as possible, but you may not need 45 days. The 45 days is really for those new companies or companies where there are issues. If you don't have any issues, it should take, days to maybe weeks in order to uh, get your TCC, your transmitter control code. So don't panic, but do apply as soon as possible. And just know that you do need separate TCCs for FIRE versus IRIS. That's one. And then within the FIRE system, you'll need a separate TCC for the 1042S forms versus the 1099 forms. But the good news is that the IRS has tutorials on how to apply for the TCC for IRIS and also a tutorial on how to apply for the TCCs, right, for the FIRE system. And the if you need multiple TCCs, say for the 1099s and the 1042S, it's still the same application, which makes it easier. You're just selecting which forms you are requesting a TCC for, and if it requires a separate TCC, the IRS will issue those at the same time from that same application. And so I am going to put a link to the applications. Actually, I'll put a link to the tutorials and the applications in the show notes. So I'll put a link to those. And it was something else I was putting a link to in the show notes for you. Oh, the IRS draft forms. Page, and then also the IRS published forms page. So you can keep track of when, right, the draft W-9 is that's out there now is published, and when and if, I should say, the draft W-9, and then also the 1099 NEC and 1099 MISC, those draft versions when they are published as well. All right. So a lot of links in the show notes, but make sure you follow those if you need to. All right. So that's it for today. I had a total of 5, right? Top 5 things to know or do now for the 1099 NEC, MISC, and 1042S tax reporting for tax year 2025. The things that you don't need to worry about now is don't worry about the $2,000 threshold changes. Those are not in effect, or that is not in effect until tax year 2026. I'd also say be aware of, but don't worry about the draft version of the W-9 that has a revision date of January 2026. Don't worry about that until you see that it has been published, and hopefully it'll do just like the revised version we have today, March 2024, where it took several months. That way you don't have to worry about anything related to collecting new W-9s if that's required while you're still trying to process 1099s and 1042s. Now, the three things you do have to know or do is you do have to use the April 2025 revised versions of the 1099 NEC, 1099 MISC. You also have to know that you can file the IRS 1042S form either in the IRA system or the FIRE system. And then the last thing that you need to do or may need to do is make sure you have your transmitter control codes that are required. So if you're filing in Irish, you need one for that. If you're filing in FIRE, you need at least one for that if you're filing 1099s. But if you're also filing 1042 S's, you do need to have a separate transmitter control code or TCC for that as well. And you may need more. Just make sure that you follow the tutorial and that you submit your applications, your application or applications in case you have to do it for Iris and Fire. Some of you out there are doing that. Make sure that you submit your applications as soon as possible so that you can be prepared with your new TCC codes as needed for tax year 2025. That will be processed during filing season 2026. All right. So thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the 367th episode of the Putting the AP in Happy podcast, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Don't forget to check the show notes for the links mentioned in the podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and writing a review of my podcast on the platform that you use to listen. Stay happy.